To love a woman beyond the projection is to meet the divine through the ordinary, no longer blinded by longing, no longer seduced by mystery. He begins to see her truly, not as an idea, but as a being, not as the keeper of his joy or the muse for his purpose, but as her own constellation of needs, histories, truths, and contradictions. This is where most men falter, because the anima he once projected onto her, the angel, the dream, the goddess, was easy to adore. She didn't speak back. She didn't bleed. She didn't ask him to hold space for her disappointment or her rage. She was everything he imagined feminine love to be: soft, forgiving, luminous. But the real woman, she is lunar. She is cyclical. She disappears when she must and returns in her own time. Her love is not constant. It is alive. It asks to be nourished, not worshipped. It demands presence, not possession. She is not here to complete him. She is here to reflect what he refuses to face. Her quiet withdrawal when he breaks his own promises. Her piercing stare when he speaks from persona instead of truth. Her distance when he shrinks from intimacy. These are not punishments. They are invitations. Invitations to rise. To meet her in the same sacred space where she resides with no mask, no performance, no armor. Carl Jung knew that a man cannot love a woman truly until he reclaims the lost parts of himself, until he retrieves the boy who fears rejection, the man who chases power to avoid vulnerability, the soul that hides behind intellect. Only when these shadows are named can he stop projecting them onto the women he loves. She will not do this work for him. She cannot. She has done her own alchemy, burned through her own illusions, survived her own awakenings. She cannot bleed again so he can feel alive. She cannot shrink so he can feel safe. She cannot disappear to make his ego feel like a savior when he finally returns. She does not need to be needed. She needs to be met. And when he realizes this, truly realizes, it is both devastating and liberating. Devastating, because he must grieve the myth of love he's carried his whole life, that a woman will save him from himself. Liberating, because it means he is finally free to create something real, something grounded, something that does not depend on mystery, but on conscious choice. It's not about how much she excites him. It's about how deeply he can be with her when there is nothing to chase, nothing to fix, nothing to prove. Can he hold her in her mundane days? Can he witness her when she's not radiant but real? Can he honor her silence not as a void, but as a language? If he can, then what begins is no longer fantasy. It is union, the meeting of two souls, not as roles, but as reflections, not as saviors, but as sovereign beings. Here, the love becomes elemental. It is not fire that consumes, but earth that roots, not wind that excites, but water that holds. There is a quiet ecstasy in being seen, not as ideal, but as whole, to be chosen not because of allure, but because of depth. And she, this woman once bathed in his projection, finally breathes in the relief of being loved in reality, not for her mystery, not for her body, but for the sacred terrain of herself. This is what the poets never write about. This is what the songs cannot sing. Because this love does not intoxicate, it transforms. He no longer seeks to escape through her. He seeks to build with her. He listens. He slows down. He sits in silence without demand. And in that stillness, something ancient returns. Respect, reverence, responsibility. No longer chasing the ghost of a woman who lives in his mind. He is now ready to love the woman who stands before him. Flawed, radiant, mysterious. Not because she hides, but because she contains multitudes. And now, finally, he is ready to see her in her entirety, in the sacred space beyond projection, where illusion has been stripped away and presence remains. He encounters something he never expected: peace. Not the peace of pleasure, but the peace of truth, the deep exhale of knowing that love does not need to intoxicate to be real. That connection does not need to be dramatic to be profound. That she, the woman he once idolized for her mystery, is far more beautiful in her humanity. She does not glow for him. She glows because she honors herself. And now, for the first time, he can see it. The glow is not an invitation. It's a boundary carved by years of confusion, awakening, heartbreak, and healing. She is not soft because she is submissive. She is soft because she has made peace with her shadows, She has cried herself into clarity. She has outgrown the need to be someone's fantasy. And so she chooses who may sit near her silence, who may see her without her needing to explain, who may hold her not as a prize, but as a partner. To love a woman like this is to love without possession, without performance, without escape. It is to remain through discomfort, through honesty, through depth. It is to be challenged into wholeness, not coddled into complacency. Carl Jung taught that wholeness is not perfection, it is integration. And in this kind of love, both the masculine and feminine must integrate their shadows. They must shed their masks. The man must stop seeking a mother in every lover. The woman must stop diminishing herself to be loved. Together, they must meet in reality raw, unscripted, sacred. This is not easy, but it is the only love that endures. Because when mystery fades, when the high dissolves, when the projections fall, what remains is soul. He no longer clings to how she made him feel. He is now present with how she is. Her joy, her fatigue, her silence, her fire, her ache, her softness that doesn't need to heal him, her strength that doesn't need to prove anything. And she no longer needs to be understood by half-healed men. She no longer performs mystery to be desired. She no longer fears being too much for those who cannot hold depth. She sits in the clarity of self-possession, no longer a muse, no longer a mirror, a woman. And that, in its purest form, is what shatters illusions, because the body fades, the mystery unravels, the longing evolves, but a soul anchored in truth that remains. He sees it now. He sees her now, not as a silhouette glowing in moonlight, not as the reason he feels alive, but as the one who chose herself and then allowed him in, the woman who no longer needs to be the answer to a man's emptiness, the woman who no longer romanticizes pain, the woman who does not chase but chooses. And now, with the illusion dissolved, with the fantasy buried, love finally begins, not as a climax, not as a spark, but as a quiet, steady knowing. She is not a mystery to solve. She is a world to be honored. The woman who knows her worth doesn't chase, she chooses. What would you think if I told you that most men don't fall in love with a woman, they fall in love with a projection, not her soul, not her scars, not her truth, but the mystery she carries like perfume, the space she doesn't offer, the silence she doesn't explain. Carl Jung knew this well. He called it anima projection, the phenomenon where a man sees not the woman in front of him, but the reflection of his own unconscious longing. He falls, not for her body, but for what it awakens in him. She is the vessel through which he touches the divine feminine for the first time, the one he has spent a lifetime suppressing, denying, exiling in the name of stoicism, strength, or survival. Her mystery is not confusion, it is magnetism, the pull of the unknown, the unclaimed, the part of himself he cannot name but deeply yearns for. This woman, she is different. She doesn't flirt with her eyes or beg with her presence. She simply exists in her own orbit, unbothered, unowned, unattached, and he feels it the moment she enters the room. Not in lust, but in stillness. The air shifts, something ancient stirs, because her mystery is not performative, it is earned. She has walked through fire to know this kind of silence. She has drowned in old selves, old stories, old lovers who wanted her body but not her truth, and now she lives in a state of graceful detachment. Her attention is sacred. Her presence is deliberate. She does not give away energy just to be seen. And that is what he falls in love with. Not the curve of her waist, not the softness of her mouth, but the fact that he cannot predict her, cannot possess her, cannot penetrate the fortress of her inner world unless she lets him in. And that lack of access, it becomes intoxicating. He mistakes that intoxication for love. But it is not love. It is obsession with mystery. She becomes the canvas upon which he paints the divine feminine nurturer, healer, seductress, mother, muse. All the archetypes he buried in his psyche are suddenly reborn in her. He sees eternity in her silence, redemption in her distance, and she senses it. She feels the way he stares not at her, but through her, as though searching for some ancient key. But she does not offer it. Not because she is cruel, but because she has learned it is not her role to complete the half-built man. This kind of woman attracts men who are hungry for wholeness, but afraid of transformation. And so, instead of rising, they reach Instead of evolving, they project. Instead of doing the shadow work, they romanticize the illusion. He doesn't want to know her. He wants to feel something through her. But a woman like this, she knows the cost of being worshipped for the wrong reasons. She has worn the crown of fantasy before, only to find herself blamed when the illusion cracked. She has been placed on pedestals built of longing, only to be discarded when the longing turned into fear. She has been mistaken for salvation by men who couldn't even save themselves. So now, she is careful. She lets him look. She lets him wonder. But she does not let him in until he proves he sees beyond the veil, until he stops describing the sensation she gives him and starts asking who she actually is beyond the ache, beyond the silence, beyond the beauty. Because mystery may attract, but only truth can hold, and most men don't want the truth. They want the feeling the mystery gives them. He thinks he loves her because she is rare, but he doesn't even know her name in the language of her soul. He hasn't earned her grief, her softness, her rage. He hasn't stood long enough in the presence of her wounds to deserve her healing. This is the illusion of love Jung warned of the anima, cast upon real women, turning them into mirrors, myths, or muses, but never humans, never equals. And so she watches him from across the room, feeling his gaze rest on the outline of her mystery. She knows what he thinks. She knows what he wants. But she also knows he doesn't love her. He loves the version of himself he sees when he's near her. And that is the most dangerous kind of longing, the kind that dresses self-reflection as romance. He doesn't crave her for who she is, but for who he becomes in her presence. Her quiet power makes him feel alive, elevated, awakened. It isn't about intimacy, it's about escape. Escape from the banality of his own life. Escape from the weight of unprocessed wounds. Escape from a world where he's constantly performing strength, yet secretly drowning in disconnection. In her presence, he doesn't have to pretend, because she doesn't ask anything of him yet. Her very stillness demands everything. She doesn't need him, and that shakes something loose inside him. For a man who has always equated his value with being needed, this is deeply disorienting. He's not used to being drawn to. He's used to being chased. Her nonchalance feels like rebellion. Her boundaries feel like seduction. But it's not seduction, it's sovereignty. She's not playing hard to get. She's not playing at all. She simply lives in a state of self-containment. Her worth is not a performance. Her silence is not a tactic. It's a result. The result of years spent peeling away the parts of herself that once begged for connection from the wrong hands. And now, when she loves it, is with presence, not pursuit. Jung would say this is the feminine that has integrated her own shadow. She does not manipulate through seduction, nor does she vanish into submission. She lives in the middle space, the sacred feminine, where mystery isn't coyness, but depth, where stillness is not absence, but power, where being unknown is not a strategy, but a boundary. He mistakes this for romance, but he doesn't see her. He sees a woman cloaked in something ancient, a feeling he can't name but can't live without. And that is the illusion. That is the anima projection at its most dangerous. He's not falling in love with her. He's falling in love with his own longing. And when longing replaces reality, no woman can survive the pedestal, because eventually the veil slips. He will see that she's not just divine, she's human, that she bleeds, that she doubts, that she gets quiet, not out of mystery, but out of exhaustion. And if he has not done the work within himself to hold that complexity, he will feel betrayed. He'll say she's changed. He'll say she's no longer radiant, no longer what he thought. But the truth is, she has simply stopped being his projection. She has asked, without words, "Can you love me even when I'm not a mirror?" And most men cannot, because to love her as she is means he must descend from fantasy into presence. He must let go of the high that her mystery gave him and enter the mundane, the sacred, the real. He must stop worshiping her silence and start listening to her voice. And that voice will challenge him, because a woman who has reclaimed herself does not speak to appease. She speaks to reveal. She speaks to invite, not into comfort, but into growth. She calls forth the man who is buried beneath roles, achievements, and avoidance. She sees him, and being seen, truly seen, is terrifying to the ego. Jung taught that the ego resists integration. It clings to projection, illusion, repetition. It does not want transformation. It wants reassurance. And that is why so many men lose her, not because she was too much, but because she required too much of him. She required his awareness, his humility, his willingness to be wrong. She required that he stop fantasizing and start showing up, that he let go of the idea of her and begin the lifelong work of knowing her. This kind of love is not a feeling. It is a furnace. It burns away false identities. It demands initiation. And very few men are ready to enter that fire, so they romanticize her mystery instead. They call it love, but it is only projection. They call it passion, but it is only egoic craving. They say she is unforgettable, but never ask themselves why they forgot to ask who she really was. The truth is, he never loved her. He loved the way she made him feel. And that is not intimacy. That is intoxication. There comes a moment, often quietly, when the projection begins to dissolve, not through conflict, not through betrayal, but through presence. He begins to realize that the woman standing before him is not the dream he painted in golden hues. She is not the eternal muse, the goddess with endless grace, the healer of his childhood wounds. She is human, and it is precisely this, her humanity, that demands his awakening. She does not orbit around him. She does not exist to soothe his discomfort. She is not a fantasy to be consumed. She is a force to be met. And this is where the illusion crumbles. For the man who has not done his inner work, reality feels like rejection, when her boundaries rise like quiet mountains, when her soul no longer glows simply because he watches her. He feels deprived, but what he is being deprived of is not love. It is escape. She is no longer a mirror. She has stepped back into herself, and so he must now ask a question that splits the soul. Was I ever in love with her, or only with how she reflected me back to myself? Jung warned of this confrontation. He called it a necessary break in the psyche, a rupture where the false self begins to collapse under the weight of authenticity. If a man can withstand this collapse, something extraordinary can occur. The birth of true love, built not on projection, but on presence. But to reach that place, he must first grieve the fantasy, grieve the version of her that never existed except in his mind, grieve the idea that love is supposed to feel like rescue, like endless inspiration, like being completed by another. Because love, real love, is not a drug. It is a discipline. It is not found in mystery. It is forged in truth. And truth is uncomfortable. Truth is inconvenient. Truth reveals all the ways he has avoided his own becoming. When she no longer fuels his idealism, he is forced to look inward. And there, in the depths, he meets his shadows, the fear of unworthiness, the hunger for validation, the rage he buried beneath detachment. Her presence activated those shadows, not because she was harmful, but because she was whole. Her sovereignty reminded him of his own fragmentation. Her ability to sit in silence reminded him how loud his emptiness had become. But here lies the paradox. What once attracted him, the mystery, is no longer enough, not because she lost it, but because she evolved. She no longer tolerates being the conduit for another's spiritual bypassing. She no longer gives herself to be decoded. She no longer allows her presence to be used as anesthesia for a man running from his own pain. She now wants to be met, not admired. She wants to be spoken to, not fantasized about, held, not worshipped, questioned, not decoded. Because the woman he called mystery was never hiding. She was simply waiting to be recognized beyond illusion. And recognition requires a depth most men never dare enter, because it demands they first recognize themselves. That is the work, to strip away the projections, to witness the soul of the other, without needing it to complete you, to love not because of how she makes you feel, but because of who she is, even when her truth no longer benefits your ego. This is not romantic. This is sacred. The woman is not the drug. She is the doorway. To enter is to shed every lie you told yourself about what love is supposed to be. To stay is to risk being changed by truth. And yet, how many men walk away when the fantasy ends? They blame her for the feeling fading, never realizing it was never hers to carry. The mystery wasn't hers. It was his projection. And now, as it fades, so does the illusion of love he built around her. But a few, will stay. They will walk through the disillusionment. They will stand in the discomfort. They will look her in the eye and say, I want to know you now, not just feel you. And for those rare few, love will begin again, not in mystery, but in mutual recognition,